They landed on the moon. And this is a picture of Earth. One of them turned around, right? The other guys were just kind of checking out, you know. But one of them turned around and snapped this photograph. And this became the first great iconic photograph of our home. Right? This changed humanity. This changed culture dramatically. Just this one image. This is the most powerful image that human beings have ever seen, supposedly. It's what some people, you know, cogently argue that this changed our culture just dramatically. Just this one act of being able to look at our home planet from outer space, or not, obviously not outer space, but from far away. Before we could never do that. And anyway, so as I said, if you're interested in how Schweitzer resolves conflicts between vital human needs and non-vital, between human vital needs and non-human vital needs, then go read his book, go read a couple other chapters in his book. But suffice it to say that Schweitzer is not necessarily on board with the idea that non-human living beings have moral rights. But he would certainly want to acknowledge their status by giving them legal rights, you know, real binding, effective legal rights that reflect their moral status. But perhaps the notion of moral rights should be distinguished from the notion of moral status. All right? And humans might be the only ones that have rights, more actual full-fledged moral rights, but that doesn't mean that non-humans don't have something lesser, like some other kind of moral status. And there's some reason to reserve moral rights language for rational, autonomous agents. Okay? Perhaps only humans have full-fledged, animated, moral personalities. Perhaps only humans can recognize rights in other beings. Perhaps only humans can be said to have special moral rights. Okay, so Schweitzer's argument is not necessarily in conflict with recognizing that humans are pretty damn important compared to other types of living beings. Okay, so what happens to this? What happens when vital human needs conflict with I mentioned Schweitzer's support for mosquito eradication using DDT, which is, I guess, the most effective method of eradicating mosquitoes to prevent outbreaks of malaria. We can anticipate what Schweitzer might say about how to resolve conflicts between vital human needs and vital non-human needs. Schweitzerian ethicists do defend some resource management practices that result in death for non-human living beings, but only if they are truly necessary to protect human lives. So the example of mosquito eradication is a good example of something that was necessary for human lives. All right. As good philosophers, we do want to keep our eyes on whether or not thinkers commit the naturalistic fallacy. That's any attempt to predicate a normative argument on an empirical claim. Remember, I like to draw that little rudimentary, right, of two cliffs, right? And on one cliff over here are the empirical claims, and on this cliff over here are the normative claims. And we as ethicists need to build a bridge, right? If we have anything valuable to contribute other than just pulling some moral principles just out of thin air and saying, yo, I all ought to do this, right? We'd have nothing to say if that's what we were, right, as philosophers. No, we're actually working very hard to establish some understanding of the moral dimensions of our obligations to humans or to non-humans, right? By just closely studying what's going on. So we're trying to move from facts to normative claims. But we don't want to commit the naturalistic fallacy when we do that. Any attempt to support a normative prescription, you ought to do this, solely on the basis of an empirical description, is an instance of committing the naturalistic fallacy and ought to be condemned. Any attempt to move uncritically from an is statement to an ought statement. All right? Now, Schweitzerian ethicists insist that some facts in nature are value facts. Okay? There are all these value facts, right? And they say that you have to notice these. If you're really observing nature, you have to notice that there are value facts happening in nature. So, for example, they describe the genetic structures of all living beings, including plants and fungi, as simultaneously normative structures. Genes define not just what is, but also what ought to be. All right? Insentient organisms are holders of value, even though they are not beholders of value. All living beings, according to this biocentric point of view, run a tailored course through their environment and through time, defending particular forms of life. And that's just a factual statement. So this is what they want to insist. All right, well, enough of this. So Schweitzer, being the meta-ethical objectivist, answers this question with a resounding yes. However, especially the first part, right? Is there value without a human valuer? Schweitzer would say absolutely yes. But William James and others in that tradition would say no. And I think it's fair to say that David Hume is actually a meta-ethical subjectivist. So that's why when Schweitzer, anyway, I'm loosely reconstructing Schweitzer's work. Don't go around telling other professors that I taught you that Schweitzer's a Kantian or that Schweitzer's a Humean, because I haven't figured all that out yet. But anyway, so here's one of our new friends. These guys, there is a pair of these at the Oregon Zoo, actually, right over here in Portland. The Amur leopards. But there are only about 30 of them left in the wild. In Russia, most of them are in Russia. Part of Russia that borders China, I believe, is where they live. And just incredible. The males get to be about 180 pounds. They can jump. Anyway, you can read about their description at the Oregon Zoo. You can go online and read about them. But they're just absolutely incredible. They can, I think, 30 feet horizontally and 10 feet vertically from a standstill. And just amazing. But there are only about 30 or 40 of them left in the wild. Most of them are in this national park in Russia. And then the rest of them are in China without a national park. But they say that they're going to go extinct very soon. Within the next 10 to 20 years, there aren't going to be any more of them left in the wild. I don't know if they breed successfully or not in what happened here. I don't know if they successfully breed in the zoo. I haven't studied them enough to know. Well, if we let this one go extinct, maybe a million humans will thrive and flourish. Right? Good consequentialist argument for that's the way it goes. It's the way the cookie crumbles. But there are some of us, who consequences be damned. These animals, there's something there, that just shouldn't be there. I'm sorry. Making them go extinct for non-vital human needs is morally wrong. So, right? It doesn't have to do with consequences. I don't care how many people are made happy or unhappy or whatever. Blah, blah, blah. Woe to those who creep through the serpent windings of utilitarianism. All right, let's see. So those are our other friends, and we're going to spend a little time talking about them. And I guess now we have to skip over all this. But there's a series of slides there. Those of you who want to educate yourselves more about salmon, take the shortcut, right? I give you all these shortcuts. But they're still here. So here are some facts about them. First and only subspecies to be listed on the Endangered Species Act on the basis of distinct cultural characteristics. Every ocean in the world has orca populations. Every ocean in the world has relatively healthy orca populations. So it could be argued that this one subspecies is not significantly different enough to warrant listing, right? So there was a big argument that went on for 5 or 10 years about whether or not these guys should be listed on the Endangered Species Act. And the good guys won the argument, the good guys being those who argued that populations are distinguished not only by physical attributes and by genetic attributes, but also by behavioral attributes and by culture. And it so happens that our relatives up there in the Salish Sea, Puget Sound, have a distinct language, they have distinct dietary practices, they have distinct social groups, distinct customs. All right? And for these reasons, was it the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, one of them, or the national, anyway, the federal agency responsible for listing them ended up agreeing with those biologists who argued that their distinct cultural features make them a distinct subspecies and therefore qualify under the Endangered Species Act to be listed. So they've been listed since 2005. There are 3 pods. Each pod is built upon a matrilineal system in which individuals are connected by maternal descent. So when the boy hooks up with the girl, the boy goes back to the girl's family. Each matriline consists of a female, her sons and daughters, and the offspring of her daughters, averaging anywhere from 1 to 17 individuals and 1 to 5 generations within each matriline. The world's oldest known orca, Granny or J2, belongs to J-pod, estimated to have been born. Their lifespan is almost identical to ours. It is, actually. Their average lifespan is exactly like ours. And then they have some really old ones like this Granny or J2. And then they have others, that are just normal old people. And they're one of only 3 mammals, I forgot about this just now, they're one of only 3 mammals that have been documented as undergoing menopause. Only one of 3 mammalian species, and the one of them is humans. Right? We're one of only 3 whose females have, and menopause is designated, and postmenopause is designated, a substantial percentage of the animal's life is spent in a condition which is reproductively infertile, which would seem to be an evolutionary disadvantage, because why the hell are you going to have all these grandmas sitting around eating food, taking up resources, they can't even have babies, right? So, whereas other animals, they recognize that, hey man, we're not going to have any of these, right? So they have babies like a chimpanzee or a dog, right? They are fertile. Obviously they might develop health problems that prevent them from getting pregnant, but they're potentially fertile until the day that they die. Whereas orcas, I think it's another cetacean. Pilot whales is what I'm thinking. Pilot whales, orcas, and humans are the only animal species whose female members undergo menopause and then continue to live for a long time afterwards. So they're really like humans. These guys are just like us. It's just amazing. Just absolutely amazing. Their lifespan and their habits, their cultural sophistication, they just don't have hands, right? So they don't do all this technological stuff that we can do. All right, there's a little reminder of the connection at the bottom here. 78% of their food originates from the Columbia Basin, and most of that originates from the Snake and its tributaries. So this is the connection between orca restoration and removal of the 4 lower Snake dams. So some simple facts. There used to be about in the 1960s, scientists believed that before humans started altering our ecosystems in this part of the country, in other words, in the mid-19th century, there were about 200, maybe a little more than 200 orcas total in Puget Sound, right? And now they're down to 82, okay? 3 main factors, I mentioned 2 of them, the lack of food, the buildup of pollutants in their bodies. Those are really the 2 most important. But then there's a lot of disturbance by marine vessels, including, I don't like to complain about our armed services, but this has got to stop. Navy blasting out huge sonar high volumes in Puget Sound. It's totally pointless. It's ridiculous that they're doing it. There's absolutely no need to do that. And yet they do that, and these incredibly sensitive, sophisticated, these poor animals, their eardrums just rupture, and they bleed to death sometimes. It's just awful. And there's no reason to do that. I'm sorry, so the Navy is very, very seriously at fault, and they need to stop. Just stop it. All right, so this is just review. This is actually getting into, this is kind of where we can leave off, because this is getting into Thursday's class. We have to mention too that Puget Sound was a source of orcas for marine parks, and that was outlawed quite a while ago now, I guess. Anyway, and orcas, of course, are not whales, they're dolphins. Orcas are big dolphins, so I think of David Bowie and that song, Heroes, that mentions dolphins. He actually allowed the people he responded to a request to lower the fee, and normally it's at least $100,000 that is charged when a song gets used in a movie, right? And it's just standard, right? It's part of the copyright. And but he ordered his agent or somebody, whoever had the power to do that, he ordered them to reduce that all the way down to $3,000. So when they made that movie about the cove in Japan, the animal dolphin slaughter, I guess that song is part of that movie. But it wouldn't have been possible, for a real low-budget film like that if David Bowie didn't have a big heart. So anyway, that's the story of our Puget Sound orcas, and have a nice Wednesday, and I'll see you all on Thursday.
I never got the attendance sheet.
Okay. Where did the attendance sheet end up? Where it is? And like I said, if you didn't sign up, if you didn't sign the attendance sheet last week, everyone was here on Thursday, because I forgot to send out the sheet. So I just marked everybody present. But if you wanted to sign it for last Tuesday, because it didn't come around to you, please do that.